Good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. This is Toby Green, host of the Junk Drawer Massacre podcast. Tonight we're going to be talking about activism beginning at home, the labor movement, and your family. Yes, I love royalty-free music. Good evening again. So this podcast here tonight is going to be just kind of a free association, a jam. I don't have a story. I don't have really a whole lot prepared other than just some concepts and ideas. And you folks who are listening tonight, who are awake or you've downloaded somewhere, bless your heart. Thank you for tolerating my nonsense. And away we go. So before we begin, I want to have a quick disclaimer on some of the terms I use or some of the thought patterns and what they may or may not convey. Number one, I tend to jump from topic to topic and be a little categorical in my application. You may occasionally hear sounds or things in the background here. I'm recording this obviously in my little office here that's a complete mess, which I will be cleaning up hopefully sometime this evening, or I will at least pretend that I'm going to clean it up before doing something else. The terms that I use or some of the topics I use, I'm going to be generalizing. There's going to be a lot of generalizing in this conversation. And it's really important that you know why I'm going to be generalizing so much. When I talk about the family, I'm going to be using a fairly traditional understanding of the family. And the reason for that is that as I talk about, I'm going to try to keep in mind any derivatives or offshoots or different ways that a home life can be organized. But if it's hitting your standard American dream family, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but if it hits that piece of, if what we're talking about refers to that piece, and these are struggles that side is having, then if you have a different formation or a different way that the family is organized, it's going to even be more. There's like a multiplier, like, hey, it's hitting the family that allegedly has their shit together. It's going to hit people who are facing different challenges in the way the family is put together. They're going to have more burdens of being involved, and it could be even more difficult, or depending on the issue, even easier to get them involved. So I just wanted to be very thoughtful and mindful of people, of different types of ways that the family is put together. So that which leads me kind of into my next piece, which is the core family. What do I mean when I say the core family? So a lot of this discussion is going to be about how being involved in the labor movement impacts folks. In particular, it impacts them if they are in a standard family. So what I mean by that is husband, wife, 2 kids. Now, again, that is, it could be domestic partnerships. It could be same-sex couples. It could be couples that really do not want any type of acronym to describe them, or any type of listing, to define them. But I'm going to, when I say core family, I'm not trying to, again, marginalize or in any way demean people from different ways of the organized family. I'm saying that because, because my family doesn't even necessarily fit into that mode, but I say that because the core family has some very significant pressures when it comes to wanting to be involved in activism. And this, generally speaking, can this core family setup goes beyond race. It goes beyond any sort of thing. It's also being exclusionary to grandparents and cousins and other pieces that don't fit this label of core family. So when we talk about union activism or trying to be involved in the movement, I'm going to be approaching it with the core family in mind. And I will be alternating between male and female roles. I will be also talking about breadwinner, or so to speak, the person who's the big money earner in the family. If it's equal, obviously it's a different setup. But the core family, I have to have a structure in which we can jump off of. I'm going to be using the core family. Okay. So I work in the labor movement. I have been part of the labor movement for going on 12 years. My family was saved by this movement many years ago. And I know, there is a certain value in the movement. And you see time after time, major polls come out and say things like, 60% of workers in America think unions are a good thing. Even in the era of Trump, in which unions are supposed to be the darndest things, they are still considered they're still considered to be a very good thing. So why aren't unions winning organizing campaigns? Why aren't, for instance, union-backed labor candidates or union-backed measures winning? What is going on? Well, to understand this, we have to dig into at least one piece, and I'm calling this the phantom menace on the movement. It's a key part of apathy. It's one of the pieces. It's not the only piece. There is no one silver bullet or one explanation for why the labor movement's struggling, but I believe this to be a key piece. So I'm going to kind of take you through some of the dynamics I've seen, especially in like a new organizing campaign. In a new organizing campaign, depending on how it's put together or what have you, at some point, somewhere in that campaign, it's very likely that house visits or some sort of type of interaction will take place where you have to go and meet the person who's the worker. For the purpose of this example, I'm going to use it as though it was a male. And there's a specific reason why I'm using it as a male. Because what I have seen in my own experience within the movement is that essentially males tend to be big talkers. They tend to say like, they'll tell you their opinion on anything under the sun. But oftentimes there's a breakdown that happens when you say, well, if this is such a problem, get involved to change it. Work with your coworkers to change it. And it's here that we tend to, depending on the issue, we tend to lose a lot of support. Now, I'm using males because in my experience, again, oftentimes it is, the women or the more of the home, the people who are basically looking at the checkbook. And believe it or not, most of the time it's usually in my experience, it's usually the wife or spouse who is actually looking at that checkbook and seeing it. They tend to be, rightfully so, kind of the conservative force in the relationship. Now, what I mean by that doesn't mean that their politics are conservative, but they tend to be the ones who are saying, "You're doing what? Wait a minute, you're doing, huh? You want to go out and join a union? I need you to have that job. We need to have that job. How are we going to survive if things fail?" Now, any good organizer worth their salt can quickly kind of turn that around or make them think that, hey, it's that fear and hope thing, right? Like, what is more important to you? Is it more important to be working in a crappy situation, or do you want to confront that fear? And usually that's a pretty successful pitch. But I bring it up to say that in new organizing, where you're trying to get people into the movement and you're trying to actively bring them in, you go there and you visit the home, and oftentimes you're trying to talk to the person who, usually the male, but oftentimes the female, who is, you're trying to talk to them about joining. Now, here's the problem. Now, I want you to think in your head that there are 4 dots, and it's the person. It would be, we'll just use for this example, it'll be the husband, the wife, and the 2 kids. American dream, picket fences, and all that stuff. And you come and visit, and you talk. In my case, I would talk to the husband who may have a vote and a potential to be a part of the union. Now, I want you to approach it from that husband's point of view, and we're going to flip it around and approach it from the wife's point of view. I'm talking to the husband about all this stuff. What's the wife doing, right? What's the spouse, the significant other, doing? What are the two kids doing? How do they connect to this? And here in this moment, I want to stop the presses because this is the moment. And you don't have to be on new organizing. This could be happening in your union hall or in your union right now. This is the place where we go from being amazing and having basically in this time of Trump or in this time of anti-worker bills, a real movement to stop it. It is here at this encounter that it all falls to shit. And I'm not even talking specifics to the campaign, whatever campaign. I don't care if this campaign is taking place in Portland, Oregon, or South Carolina, or Jacksonville, Florida, or Houston, Texas. It doesn't matter to me where this is taking place. It is almost the same dynamic over and over again. And the same dynamic is this. No matter how good or bad that visit goes, the second that unless you're a really terrific organizer, most of the time, the second that you leave that house, you probably didn't come there with anything for the family to plug into. You probably came there just wanting to talk to the person who would vote. So now you are leaving that house with 3 other individuals, and yes, they all count. Just because they're kids doesn't mean kids are silent and never heard, and doesn't mean that they're going to weigh in, but you are leaving that home without anything to plug the spouse and the children into. That's craziness. And let me explain why that's craziness. That spouse, I mean, think about it. If it was, regardless of who it is you're there to visit, if you are talking to that person, you leave that home, that spouse is going to go, number one, this movement doesn't care about me, so my suspicion is up. You're talking all this stuff about how this is important for families, and it is. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not in a union, forming and being part of a union is what this is all about, because without a union, you do not have a mediating institution of any type to protect you from the winds of the world. You might as well you're out there in an at-will job, and you're always one step away from ticking off the wrong person being out of a job. So, when I say these things, I just want it to be understood that it's just how I'm kind of approaching working through it. But again, there is nothing for that family, that piece to be part of. And that brings me to this whole podcast, because I know that I have more success, however, that if I was visiting, again, using the core family example, if I was visiting the wife or the checkbook watcher and I was talking to her about the movement, I have found that women in the labor movement are much stronger than the males, can act much more confidently when they're the ones that you're trying to work with and organize. They're the ones who have a much kind of more dialed in. And again, generalizations. They tend to be the people who are much more dialed in, much more willing to throw down and be like, look, this matters for my family. And that is a fascinating piece, I think, on where we're at in the movement. And it creates a tremendous amount of pressure, because what I'm about to say is this, is that basically in this movement, if you don't have that support at home, and I know many, many people in the movement who do not have that support at home necessarily, who are trying to be union activists. I know many people who can't be in relationships or have a difficult time maintaining a healthy relationship with another person because it infringes on their activism. There's those people too. And bless all their hearts, because they're not bad people, but it's like, boy, I can't do this piece. The pressures in the movement are profound. And the silent partner is what I call the movement when we are too member-based or too just really only seeing the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. And so I call it the silent partner. We have to be very thoughtful and start being incredibly thoughtful about this thing. Now, I'm talking about this from a staff-esque perspective. But now let me kind of flip and talk about from just you. I'm going to assume for a second, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably aren't a union staff person or in the labor movement in any sense. You're probably an activist, and you're probably somebody who really cares about people. So I'm talking about you for a moment. You go out and you're a member, and you got the union meeting that's going to be happening at night, and you want to go to it, right? or you got the union event, or there's that canvas that's